Okay, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this morning on the Corporate Transparency Act and the BOI reporting obligations. We're really excited to have Noeli Serna here as our presenter this morning. She has her own firm called Serna Legal Services, and she's actually doing the presentation today in English, and then in October on the 22nd, she'll be doing it again for us in Spanish. But Noeli's been a really important part of our legal network over the last several years as she's started her firm and built her firm with several other employees. It's just a real gift to have an attorney who's bilingual and can work equally well in English and Spanish with our clients, and is just really I think down to earth in assisting them where they're at. So we're excited to have her do this webinar this morning, and I'm just going to turn it over to her, and we'll go from there. Thank you, Noeli.
Thank you, Kurt. No, I appreciate that. It's been a pleasure working with you, Kurt, the RPBA, an amazing organization, and what you're doing for your business clients as well. So good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Excited to talk about the Corporate Transparency Act, your obligations as business owners with respect to it. So we'll go into that momentarily. Before I do start, just want to make a quick note. The chat is open, as I can see you are using it, which is great. I can see the chat, I monitor it. I always say, please, if you have questions throughout the presentation, use the chat, interrupt me, don't hesitate. I think it's more beneficial to everyone if you ask your question as it comes up, as you think of it, rather than waiting until the end when we've forgotten. I also invite you, if you'd like to share your business, who you are, just to get a little sense of who we have in the room. The chat is a great function for that purpose as well. So would love to see that. All right, but let's talk a little bit about what we're discussing today. And of course, before that, I have to give my legal disclaimer as an attorney that please, any information that I do and I'm about to share with you should not be interpreted as legal advice, as there is no attorney-client relationship. But we're here to provide you with guidance, with some information about the requirements of this new law, federal law, the Corporate Transparency Act. I see a question, Nancy, already. Non-for-profits do not need to file beneficial ownership information reports. So the Corporate Transparency Act, the BOI reporting, doesn't apply to nonprofits because nonprofits don't have owners, right? So it doesn't apply to them. That's an exception to the law, but great first question. All right, so I don't anticipate this presentation taking the full hour. I'm going to go very high level over what this is, what kind of information you need to submit. And I think what's going to be most helpful is then I want to do a live demonstration of where are you going to file this online, what kind of questions are they going to ask you, so that you have the actual benefit of seeing it done live, which I think is always more helpful than just talking about it at a high level. But I think a little high level is good as well. So let's talk about that for a moment, right? And why we need to be doing this. Why is this new Corporate Transparency Act important? So the Corporate Transparency Act, you'll see it abbreviated as CTA, right? It's a new law that went into place January 1st of 2024 of this year. So this is a federal law. It was a law that was enacted and is now administered through the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. You'll see that abbreviated as FinCEN. That's how we refer to this government agency. So this government agency, they essentially protect consumers in the US. They help protect us against illegal activity like money laundering, tax evasion, other financial kind of crimes and activities. So this law that they put into place, the goal of it is to increase transparency around corporate ownership, right? So what this law does is it establishes a requirement for certain businesses to report information about who their beneficial owners are. And they have to report this information to FinCEN. So why do they want us reporting this information? Well, the idea behind it is that unfortunately in the United States, there are people, businesses in the US, others abroad, that create legal entities in the United States for illegal purposes. people create these shell companies or these entities for tax evasion, for money laundering, all sorts of things. So that's why FinCEN, the government agency that oversees these kinds of crimes, wants there to be now more transparency over who actually owns all of these legal entities that have been created in the United States. The idea being, hopefully, we'll see if it actually makes a difference, but the idea is that if there's more transparency over corporate ownership and who owns entities, then hopefully it's a little bit harder for criminals to hide their activities behind these shell companies as well. So that's the purpose, right? That's why this law was put into effect. Again, it went into effect January 1st of 2024. And now it has created obligations for those of us that own certain kinds of legal entities in the United States, especially impacting many of our small business owners as well. Okay, so speaking of that, right? Okay, so we have this new Corporate Transparency Act. We have now this requirement to file what's called a beneficial ownership information report. That's what BOI stands for, beneficial ownership information. So now that's what this law requires. We have to file this report with the federal government. But then the question is, okay, but who, right? Who needs to file this report with the government? So the BOI report and who needs to file it includes corporations, limited liability companies, and similar entities that are formed by filing a document with the Illinois Secretary of State. Nancy asked this question earlier. This excludes non-for-profit corporations, and there are some other potential exclusions that we're not going to discuss today, but if you have a question, right, if your particular kind of business or entity needs to file, happy to talk about that offline for your particular business. Essentially, though, this is going to apply to U.S. entities that were formed in the U.S., and it even applies to foreign entities. That means entities or businesses outside of the U.S. that are registered to do business in the United States. It would apply to them as well. So just a quick breakdown. What are domestic entities? Domestic entities are corporations, LLCs, similar business entities created by filing articles of organization, incorporation, whatever it's called for your entity with the Secretary of State or the state agency that registers these entities. Foreign entities, maybe it's a foreign company that's registered to do business in the United States. That means that they have to file some kind of a document with the state government office in the US. Those would be the foreign kind of entities that are required to also now comply with the Corporate Transparency Act and file a BOI report. Overall, I would say if you are a business owner, you have your corporation, you have your LLC, other kinds of entities, you're a for-profit business, then most likely you need to file this BOI report. If you are a sole proprietor, what that means, you have a business, but you have not taken the step to incorporate it, or in other words, you have not created a legal entity for your business, then you do not need to file this report because you don't have a legal entity that the government is concerned about. You're filing as a sole proprietor. It's clear, right? Who owns this business? It's you as an individual. To Sherry, to your question, does this apply to single member LLCs? Yes, because they have a legal entity. The government wants to know who owns that legal entity. If it's one person, then it's that one person, right? If it's more, then we want to know who all of the owners of that entity are. But yes, absolutely does apply to single member LLCs. All right, so I always jump to this first before we talk about the requirements, because sometimes I get questions of, okay, what would even happen, right, if I don't file this report? What's the consequence? Well, according to the law, there are consequences, there are penalties for not complying. We'll talk about the deadlines to comply and all of that, but just wanted to, flag it here. These penalties can be quite significant. So according to the law, if someone does not file this on time, that company can face penalties of up to $500 a day for each day that they have not filed their report after the deadline. There's according to the law, criminal penalties of up to 2 years in prison. There are other, potential fines associated with criminal sanctions or penalties for not doing it. Now, will the federal government enforce it? Will they actually put someone in prison for not filing? I don't know, right? But I always say I don't want you to be the guinea pig for that, right? These penalties are there, they can be enforced. So let's make sure and file our BOI reports on time and avoid any question of whether this actually applies to us. So now that I've scared you, let's talk a little bit about the dates, right, associated with filing, and let's think about when you should be filing this report for your own business. So some critical dates here. There are 2 buckets right now of filing dates that could apply. So first one, and maybe the most common one, are businesses that created their legal entities, you incorporated, before January 1st of 2024. If you created your entity before the beginning of this year, then you have until January 1 of 2025, essentially until the end of this year, to submit that report for your legal entity. Okay, so they gave everyone a year. For businesses that were formed before January 1 of this year, they get a year to file this report. That applies to even if you have an entity that you filed in the past that you are no longer using, that maybe was involuntarily dissolved with the state, those entities also may need to file this report. So don't think that just because you let an entity just die or you just abandoned it doesn't mean that you don't have this obligation. You may still have it. So something to keep in mind. Now, the second bucket here are entities that were formed on January 1 of this year and beyond, right? So those entities that were formed this year, they have 90 days from the date that their entity was registered officially with the state to file this report. So they're about 3 months essentially to file after you've received confirmation you have that filing date for your entity. You have 3 months essentially to file this BOI report. Beyond that, so once January 1 of 2025 hits, we'll see if FinCEN gives us any updates. We have heard that maybe after 2025, that 90-day period may be reduced. We're not sure yet, right, what that updated date may be. So that's something to look out for after at the beginning of the next year to see if that date is reduced. If you create a new entity, you may have to file this report sooner, but that remains to be seen. So those are the dates, right, for compliance. Those are the ones that we need to keep in mind. Think about when you created that entity, what's the official registration date for your entity, because that will dictate when you need to file this BOI report for your particular legal entity. Okay. All right. So then, the important piece here then. So I'm going to have to file this BOI report. This can be done online. It can be done through a paper filing. I would recommend if you're comfortable doing this online, I think that's the best and most efficient way to go. And we will show you live today what that looks like, what that process looks like. But in case you're submitting this report yourself, you're mailing it in, I do want to give you some information about what this report is going to ask of you, right? What information are they actually going to require us to submit? So of course, they're going to ask for, in all cases, the legal entity information. So they'll ask for your legal entity's legal name, which is the full name that was registered with the state. So it's, my firm is Serna Legal Services. I'm going to put the full legal entity name is Serna Legal Services, LLC, right? So let's make sure we put our legal names in this report, the address of the principal place of business. They're going to ask where it was incorporated and then the EIN number for that entity as well. Then they're going to ask for information about then what they care most about, the beneficial owners. So I'm going to talk about this very high level because for small, mid-sized businesses, it's going to be fairly straightforward to determine who is actually a beneficial owner of the business, because the definition, right, of a beneficial owner is a person who directly or indirectly exercises substantial control over the business, or they own or control at least 25% of the ownership. This can get complex, and this can require some legal really guidance, especially for those bigger companies and businesses that maybe they have a president, a CEO, officers that aren't actually owners. They don't own shares, they don't own any kind of equity in the business. Those officers may still be considered beneficial owners, even though they don't have an actual ownership percentage in that company. So that's where this gets more complex, especially for those bigger companies that have these corporate structures, that maybe need to get more guidance and make sure that the beneficial owner you're actually reporting for your business is in fact every beneficial owner of that business. So just something to keep in mind. It's not just as simple as you own 25%, at least 25% of the business. No, it also could include someone that exercises substantial control. And that term substantial control, that's up for interpretation. That's where we need to get a little bit more guidance if it's a question for you. So highly recommend speaking with an attorney, with someone that can help you assess that for your particular business if there's any concern or question. So for each of those beneficial owners, they're going to want information about them. So information includes the legal name of that person, date of birth, address, and then they're going to want an image of an identification. So an identification, what most people are submitting is an image of your driver's license. A passport works as well. They're accepting both US and even foreign passports for that purpose. So you'll have to upload, if you do that online, upload an image of that identification to the system as well. Otherwise, there's going to be one section, and I'll show you that when we look at the actual report online, that's going to ask about the information about the company applicant. So the company applicant, that can be a little up for debate as well, because it's going to depend sometimes on who actually registered your legal entity for you. For many of us, especially small business owners, maybe we took the initiative, we went on the Secretary of State, we submitted the information and the documentation for creating our own entities. In that situation, you are the company applicant, right? Sometimes business owners hire attorneys, right, to create legal entities for them, to guide them, to submit the documentation on their behalf. In that case, it may be that attorney, that law firm, is the company applicant for that business. So if that's the case, that business owner needs to reach out to that law firm in this example and request what's called it's the company applicant, the FinCEN. There's an identifier, there's a number that applicant, that organization should have, that you can then insert into your own BOI report. Serna Legal Services, we have our own FinCEN identifier number. We share that with any clients that we took the initiative to create legal entities for them. So that's something to keep in mind, is you really need to think about who actually submitted that documentation on behalf of my business to create that legal entity, because that may be the company applicant. That's why, for example, for the RPBA, right, I always say to organizations that guide their clients through creating entities, it's important that you can guide them, you can explain, right, how an entity should be created, where do you go, how do you submit it. But I always recommend leaving the actual task of submitting the documentation to your client, right, to complete that process. Otherwise, we run into issues of you then being a company applicant on behalf of that business as well. So just something to keep in mind. But for business owners that are submitting this report, think critically about how that entity was created, who in fact submitted the documentation to the state registering that entity on your business's behalf. Because then if it's not you and it's someone else, you may need to get information from that organization as well. That goes for things like LegalZoom. People use these other third-party services to do this sometimes. You may need to reach out to those organizations for their number to submit as company applicant information as well. All right, so that is essentially very high level some of the information that will need to be submitted. And it sounds straightforward, but again, as businesses are more complex, there's more nuance and gray area around who's the actual beneficial owner, who was the company applicant. So there's more to sometimes look into for this analysis as well. But for single members, small businesses, single member LLCs, single owner kinds of businesses, this tends to be a very straightforward assessment and generally pretty easy to complete as well. So that's a little bit about the information that you'll need to submit. Before I go into a live demonstration of actually looking at this application and seeing what they need us to fill out, just a couple of notes as well. So filing the report, that initial BOI report, it is free of cost. They're not going to charge you anything. You submit it online, you're done. There is no obligation to do it each year. The only time you may need to submit an updated report is if there is a change to the information that you submitted before. So for example, maybe there's a change in the address of the business, maybe there's a change in your information as the owner, maybe you moved, etc. If there are changes to the information you submitted, then you can submit what's called an updated BOI report as well, free of cost. Otherwise, there is no obligation to submit this report on a year-to-year basis. So the caveat with the updated reports, the rule is that companies are required to file an updated report within 30 days of the date that the change occurs. Right, so you have 30 days once you change an address. Okay, we have 30 days to submit an updated report to FinCEN. Maybe you realize that there's an error or you put something wrong in that initial report. You can also file what's called a corrected BOI report to fix any typos or any issues that were wrong in that initial report. So again, there's that 30-day grace period to submit those updates from the day that you saw that there was an issue there. So that's some side information there. And then I see a question here. Will this be something that our PBA should start to screen clients for or require certification of submission? I think it's something that you should always ask. As an organization that works with small businesses, with business owners, I think it's great to keep it on a business owner's radar to see if they've done it. It's up to the business owner, right, to comply and to do it of their own accord. And I'll show you at the end. Hopefully it allows me to make it all the way through the application, but you'll get I may not, because I don't want to submit a false, BOI report, but at the end of it, you're going to get a kind of an announcement and a notice, right, that says you've completed the report, save this, print this, confirmation for your records. I think it's really important for business owners to remember to do that step as well, because that'll show a number specifically for their report that they can then refer back to in the future. But business owners need to know to print that page, because they won't necessarily send you an email with that confirmation page as well. All right, so any questions before I dive into the live demonstration of this report?
Noeli, I have like an in the weeds question. Is it okay if I just say it?
Yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but so like when we're administering another grant program coming up, which is new territory for us as our PBA, and also we help people complete grant applications and things. So a lot of times there's a requirement for a screenshot or an actual image of being in good standing with the state of Illinois. Mm-hmm. Do you perceive that this would be something that would also become required for that sort of scenario?
It could be. I think it just depends on the grant program and who's running it, whether they want that confirmation. It very well could be. So even more reason to make sure our clients are getting those confirmation pages printed when they see them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, I have a question. What if, and I'll email you on this, because regarding the client that added a new member, are they going to have to file the BOI for the previous LLC and then the new one as well?
So what'll happen if they haven't already filed a BOI report, they'll just file a new one, right? Their first one, and that'll show all the new information, all the current information, which is the 2 owners, right? If they
Okay,
already
so-
filed a report before when it was only 1 owner, now they have to file an updated report.
Okay, yeah, no, we hadn't filed that yet.
Okay, then, I mean, this is the time, right, to file that report, and they'll just include the new current information, which is the 2 owners of the business.
Oh. Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome. Good questions. All right, any others before I see how well I can do a live demonstration of this? Okay, really good questions, thank you. All right, so let's give this a shot. So if we go, can everyone still see my screen? Is it the Google search page? Okay. So if I were someone that was going to go online and file this report, what I would probably do, honestly, is Google Corporate Transparency Act, FinCEN. Okay. So when I Googled Corporate Transparency Act, FinCEN BOI report, first one that came up was this FinCEN, you know, FinCEN.gov, beneficial ownership information reporting. This is FinCEN's official government page. So we're going to click there. So this is the main kind of mainframe, main homepage that comes up. So they actually, FinCEN has done a pretty good job of giving us FAQs, information, helping guide people through this. So they have a lot of answers to questions like, how do I get this ID? How do I file it? There's an FAQ page, which I think is very well written, very detailed if people have questions. But if this is somebody that is ready to move forward and file this report, what I will go to is here is file a report using the BOI e-filing system. So I'm going to click there. And then this comes up. So we have here BOI e-filing. I don't know what BSA, Bank Secrecy Act. I don't know what that is. We'll go to the BOI reporting and get started. So here it shows us 2 ways we can file. We can file it in paper form. So they'll give you a PDF that you can print, or you can file it online, which is the online way to do this. So we're going to go to prepare and submit the BOI report. We get this government warning, we agree, and here we are. So this is the report, right? Here is the page where we have to start submitting information. So let's just walk through this high level. I'll demonstrate it. I don't know how far it'll let me go. It probably will let me get through it, but we'll see how this goes. All right, so first question, what kind of filing? So I just mentioned, right, we have the initial report. If someone has not filed this yet, it's going to be their initial report. Maybe it's a corrected report. So like I mentioned, if you realize you put something wrong in the initial one, you need to correct it, then you file a corrected. If there's been a change to the business, then you update it. So you update a prior report. So most of us, if we haven't done this already, are going to start with an initial report. And we just click next. So the next question is with respect to the reporting company. The reporting company is the business, right, for which you are filing this report. I'll mention here, because even I needed to read through some of these when I did it for the first time. Anywhere you see these little question marks, need help, if you push down, it'll explain what are we asking for here. And it does a very good job actually of explaining what does all of this mean? Do I need to click it? Do I not? So highly recommend if you have questions on any particular question, you take a look at this need help section. So here, request to receive FinCEN ID. Most of us will not need this. I did as a law firm because like I mentioned, this FinCEN ID is an identification number that will be given to my business because I file people's LLCs, corporations on their behalf. So I wanted to get a FinCEN ID myself. Most people, if you're a business owner just trying to file a report for your own business, you probably won't need this FinCEN ID. So no need to click on that. Most of us are not going to be foreign pooled investment vehicles. So many of us business owners are going to keep these blank. But again, this is business by business specific. So if you're wondering if any of this applies to you, take a look at the need help section and read more about it. So then, reporting company's legal name. So I'm just going to use mine as an example. So I'm Serna Legal Services, LLC. Here they're asking, do you have a DBA? In Illinois, this is called an assumed name. Have you filed an assumed name for your entity? I actually do. So my assumed name is my Spanish version of the business name, which is Serna Servicios Legales. That I filed that with the Illinois Secretary of State. So you should put your DBA here if you've done that. So then form of identification for the business. Remember, this is information about the reporting company. So they'll ask, what kind of tax ID type are you submitting? Most entities are probably going to submit their EIN number. I don't know my EIN number, but I think it has to be like 9 numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. Invalid. Oh, well, it's not going to let me, but let's see if it lets me go on. So you'll put your EIN number here. This is only applicable to a foreign tax ID if somebody's using a foreign tax ID, which many of us probably will not. So then they'll ask, where was your entity formed? What is the jurisdiction, means the place where this entity was first registered. Most of us will probably be the United States. In my case, what state did you register it with? Illinois. And then anything that's grayed out like this means it does not apply to you. You don't have to fill it out. So then they'll ask for your address, right? So what's the address of the essentially principal place of business for this entity? So I don't know, 300. I'm just gonna make something up. All right, so then we put the address, we click next, good, it let me go on. So the next category they're gonna ask about is, who are the beneficial ownerships? Well, actually, sorry. So they're asking, who is the company applicant? So first here, they're going to ask, so this is good, a good point here. If you are an existing reporting company, so what this says is check if existing reporting company as of January 1, 2024. So what this is asking is you have to check this box if the reporting company was created or registered before January 1, 2024. Do not check the box if your business was created or registered on or after January 1, 2024. So why? Because for those businesses that were created before January 1, 2024, you're not going to have to submit company applicant information. Okay, so they're only going to ask for company applicant information for businesses that were created January 1 of this year and afterward. So that's why if I click this, it's going to gray out all this information down here about the company applicant. So if you just see, now I can't fill out any of this, because if I created my business before January 1, 2024, they don't need to know your company applicant information, because many businesses may not know, they can't reach out to the law firm anymore that created their business 10 years ago. You know, they want to avoid any of those issues for business owners. If you created your business January 1 of this year and later, then you have to fill out this information, right? So you need to fill out, for example, here's what I mentioned about if a law firm, for example, created your legal entity for you, you need to reach out to that law firm or to that organization that created your entity and submit their FinCEN ID number. You'll have to ask them for that and enter it here. And when you do that, you shouldn't need to fill out any of this other information because the FinCEN ID is sufficient. Otherwise, if you created your own entity, for example, you won't fill out anything in this box 18, but you will fill out name, address, and then here we'll skip this and show it to you otherwise, but you're going to need to submit your documentation, your ID twice, both as the company applicant and then as the beneficial owner. So I'm going to just reiterate this. If you are a business that was created before January 1 of 2024, you click this box and everything here, you don't have to submit anything down here. If you created your entity January 1 of this year and beyond, then you have to fill out this information below. Okay, so that's company applicant. The last category, when I click next, now they want to know information about the beneficial owners. Okay. So here, some companies, some businesses have more than one owner, right? So you'll have the opportunity to add more than one here. But let's just give you an example of what they're going to ask. So they're going to ask, this probably doesn't apply because probably isn't a minor that's submitting this. You probably won't have a FinCEN ID, probably not an exempt entity, though if you think you're an exempt entity like a nonprofit, you know, ask, right? There are other exemptions, but let's just assume you need to file this report. So we have to give our information. So as a beneficial owner, give your last name, first name, your date of birth, your address. So this is your residential address. And then here's where they're going to add identification. So here are the options that come up: state driver's license, some other state issued ID, US passport, or foreign passport. Those are your options. You have to write the identification number here. Where was this issued? And then here is where I need to upload an image of that identification. So all of this is done electronically, and you submit it all here directly. All right, and then you click next. And then this is essentially your submission page. You give them your email, name, you agree, you're a human, you submit it. I'm not going to show it here, but then it gives you a confirmation page that it tells you, make sure you print this. And that's it. And that's you filing this BOI report online. It's a little clunky at times because sometimes it'll depend too on who you are, when your business was formed, but I'm going to reiterate how helpful these drop-down menus are to explain what it is that they're asking of you in each of these areas. But otherwise, you know, can take, you know, I know the process, so it would take me 5 to 10 minutes maybe to go through it. Others may take a little longer, but really isn't a hugely time-consuming activity. But we do want to make sure, of course, to submit the right information when we are doing it. Any questions on that?
I'm going to ask an obvious one.
Sure.
Is this available in Spanish or only English?
Right now, I believe it's only Spanish. The report itself, when you file it, that's a good question though. When you file it online, they only give you the English version. I'm not sure if they have a paper version that's in Spanish. I'll be fully, you know, transparent because we haven't
Okay.
needed it.
I'll check it out. Thanks, Noeli.
Sure. Any other questions about this? Okay.
While we're
I
doing
have a
it,
question. Ooh,
Sure.
just about the applicant information. We only need their FinCEN number. That's all we need.
It depends.
Or do-
If they do not have a FinCEN ID, which they may not, you may need to get all the other information that it asks, like the name, address, all of that for that company applicant.
And I don't remember, did I ask for an ID?
It did. So it gives you either
Okay.
you have a FinCEN ID, you put that in, it won't ask you for anything else. If the company applicant does not have a FinCEN ID, they have to fill out all their information there.
I'm sorry, and I meant like an ID, like, do I need to upload an ID?
Oh, yes, for the company applicant, yes, as well. Yeah,
Unless I have the FinCEN number.
right.
Got it.
Yeah.
How difficult is it to get a FinCEN number, and what are the ramifications of that?
It's not, it's you submit it as part of this process. And they issue, I think they issue it to you immediately, essentially after you submit the form. Very easy, no ramifications. It's just an ID number that you can take and use for your clients if you're creating legal entities for them.
Okay, thanks.
while we continue to have questions, I'm gonna put in the chat just a link to a survey that you can make a copy of it and fill it out later. Or you can fill it out now, but just to make sure I get that in there before we end. So, but please keep asking questions.
Thanks, great. Yeah, any other questions? Those are great questions, by the way. So others may come up, right? And I think it's very business by business specific. Even to those of you that watch this after the fact and are seeing a recording, there may be other considerations depending on your kind of business and how it's structured. So to that point, you know, I'm always happy to be a resource. So I put my email, our firm's phone number here. Happy to answer any of those questions at any time. But I would say if you have a question you're unsure, better to ask it than submit the wrong information and then have to submit something corrected after the fact. But hopefully this was at least helpful to get you started and to know what we need to do when we need to do it.
No, I did have one more question. Just
Sure.
with general partnerships, is it, do they need to file, or does it depend on the nature of the partnership? I've read it's kind of both, and I wasn't sure. Do you know?
So if they created a general partnership, like they submitted some kind of documentation to the state, then they may need to file, right? If they created, there's a general partnership, there's an entity, right? You can create, or a limited partnership. It just depends.
Right.
If they did not file for creating an entity with the Secretary of State, then they may not need to. That's essentially operating as like a sole proprietorship, but as a partnership as well. So it really depends. It really
Okay.
depends on how they're organized.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
You know, on the first page, when you went to the website, there was this little video. Was that little video helpful in any way?
So I don't know about a video. I have not seen any videos yet on FinCEN's website. They may have some guidance. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, it was called demo.
Okay, maybe FinCEN themselves has done a demo of this too. So definitely encourage you to take a look at that. Yeah.
Anybody else? This is your chance.
Just this, you know, in my business and CPAs as well, we're
Mhm.
telling our clients that they have to do this. And some CPAs and other professionals are charging for it, but if they don't do it, then it's on their own head, right? Or if they don't ask for help.
The business, right? You're asking if it's yes, it's absolutely on your business's responsibility, the business's responsibility to do it, right?
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Jose. I'm glad it was helpful. Anyone else?
All right. Well, if no one else has any questions, I really want to thank Noeli for doing this presentation for us today. And, you know, if you want to come back and hear it in Spanish, October 22nd at 11 o'clock, we'll be doing it again. But thank you so much, and just appreciate you so much for all that you provide for our clients and being a resource for legal issues that come up. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Happy to do it. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Everyone have a great day. Thank you for coming.
Thank
Bye.
you. Gracias.
Gracias.